time of writing, we're 3 days out from the 25th anniversary of the first Pokemon game. February 27th, or Pokemon Day as it's become known, marks the time of year when the Pokemon Company celebrate their franchise and announce what their plans are for the franchise in the coming future. But what should be a day of nostalgia and celebration is turning really ugly inside the fanbase. Let's talk about that a little bit. Pokemon fans clowning themselves is so commonplace and well known on the internet these days that now we have people who hype up the franchise for the rest of the year, spending the days up to Pokemon Day trying to play damage control and temper expectations. This time, as it's been for a long time now, the word of the day is Sinnoh Remakes, or a remake of the games Pokemon Diamond, Pearl and Platinum, originally released in 2006 and 2008 for the Nintendo DS. This was the fourth generation of the Pokemon franchise, and so far the first three generations have had their games remade, so naturally the fanbase is expecting a remake of these games sometime soon. That only makes sense, right? A large group of the fanbase thinks so anyway, and these games are very beloved for some reason. I don't really care for them myself. So when the buzz begins that someone thinks these games might be being remade, people get very attached to the idea. Maybe some Pokemon influencers who genuinely want these remakes start jumping on the idea too, making videos and tweets about it, which only adds credence to the idea. After all, these guys make a living from talking about Pokemon. They must know what they're talking about. Sinnoh remakes, fuck yeah, it's happening! And then the confirmation bias starts setting in. The fanbase will start seeing things and taking them as evidence that the Sinnoh remakes are coming because they already have decided that it is happening. Certain Pokemon are missing, certain characters and towns from Sinnoh might be mentioned. Maybe one of the themes from the Sinnoh games might have some similarities with those showing up in the new games. In this case, it's the two legendary Pokemon from Sinnoh could control time and space, whereas in the new games, the big bad legendary Pokemon from the base games of Sword and Shield can warp space and time when it's in its biggest, baddest form. I mean, that might mean something if anyone ever made a point of that fact and it wasn't just used for a cool visual that was then explained away in a Pokédex entry. Or another piece of the more circumstantial evidence was that certain legendary Pokemon were missing from the max raid lairs in the latest expansion, which just so happened to be from the Sinnoh games. That makes sense, they wouldn't need to put them in there if they were just about to release a remake. Except there's actually a bunch missing from every generation, and the main three legendaries from Sinnoh were in there, which you think would be the first to be removed if this were gonna be an obvious hint, right? And as far as I can see, all the evidence that the fanbase has used to back up this point are this same level of wishy-washy and subjective, but when you approach them all with the idea that these games are coming to be a fact rather than just an idea, all of these pieces of evidence look way more concrete. And by the way, I'm being very vague when I talk about the fan base or the influencers because this isn't just the fault of one or two people. There isn't some rogue actor out there pulling this big grift and lying to the entire community for profit or anything. This is just a problem with fandom as a whole, especially how it relates to the corporations making the products. But what's the problem here? A bunch of fans think something's going to happen, they spot a bunch of things that might back up their claim. It's harmless, right? Well, what about when it never gets announced? They all just pat each other on the back and go, ah, oh silly me. Well, what they did announce seems kind of cool. More of this franchise we love can't be a bad thing, can it? If you think that's accurate, you've clearly not been on the internet for very long. Because the thing about Pokemon and nerdy fandoms in general is that they're packaged and designed and sold not simply as a product to enjoy, but as a personality aspect for you to take and make a part of yourself. Because if you've internalized being a Pokemon fan and made it part of your personality, you're more likely to pick up any and everything they offer you. You're more likely to forgive them for their terrible anti-consumer business practices, and you're more likely to praise them publicly when they adjust to a slightly less terrible anti-consumer business model. I mean, even I'm guilty of it to an extent. I give them praise when they switch from releasing a third version of their games to releasing a season pass of DLC. Not mentioning how awful it is that they still release every game twice, fully knowing that a large portion of their player base will buy both near identical versions. But you know, not immune to propaganda and all that. And just as an aside, Pokemon isn't the only thing that does this, not by a long shot. Most vaguely nerdy fandoms are guilty of this thing. The Marvel and DC cinematic universes, Star Wars, and pretty much every video game developer has forged such dedicated fan bases that will forgive all sorts of anti-consumer bollocks. You can just watch any of Jim Sterling's videos on Rockstar or CD Projekt Red and take a glance through the comments section to see it in action. I'm singling out Pokemon as an example because of recent events and, well, it's a world I exist in professionally a fair amount, so I see a lot of this. I tend to make a habit of using a specific as an example to make a more general point, and I forget to mention the bit where it's an example used to generalize and I get accused of singling out one thing. So here's that thing. There's a mountain of shit, and this is a case study of just a single turd. But as I was saying, there's a weird relationship between Pokemon and their fans, and I mean, it's a bit parasocial in a way. In interviews with staff working on the games, they seem to focus almost entirely on newer and younger fans, much to the chagrin of the older and more competitive fanbase, but the fanbase will still seem to ignore this fact when it's convenient for them, and instead becoming more and more adamant that the callbacks and cameos and coincidences are all there on purpose as little clues for them to decode. This section of the fanbase thinks that they know far more about the developers and their decisions than they actually do. And then when it turns out they were wrong, that the people they thought they had figured out had made an unexpected move, the fans feel betrayed and they lash out. And from their perspective, there's only two options. Either they're withholding this thing that everyone wants, and that's just rude, or they were lying the whole time, which is also very rude. Since this sort of mod mentality confirmation bias is so deeply entrenched, the idea that the evidence might just have been circumstantial doesn't even cross their mind. As far as they're concerned, the Sinnoh remakes are real, and their friend, the Pokemon Company, is just withholding them in order to release these other games that nobody wants. They did it! They fucking did it! Not only one, but two Sinnoh games were announced the day before Pokemon Day, because, you know, why the fuck not? Turns out, y'all were right, and I'm a big, dumb dummy. I'm still gonna do the video though, it's kind of still got a point, I guess. And I don't really blame the PokeTubers, these YouTube personalities that hype up things like this. I mean, their job literally relies on getting people to watch their videos, and once again, they are slaves to the algorithm. A larger than average chunk of the PokeTuber subscriber base is more likely to click on a video that suggests a remake of their favorite game might be coming. So the algorithm notices this and starts burying any video that doesn't get those same amount of views, doesn't have those keywords, and generates those kind of words in the metadata. These people, a lot of whom are making the equivalent of minimum wage or even less by working full time on this, are trapped by the system to make a specific flavor of clickbait, further pushing this particular idea. And they're prone to confirmation bias too, because they're just fans of the franchise, just like everyone else. I guess the thing to do in these situations, if the Sinnoh remakes aren't announced, is before you get too mad at Nintendo and the Pokemon Company for not giving them to you, take a step back, look at all the evidence you amassed from a neutral standpoint. Was it really evidence? Or had you already decided your conclusion and worked back from there? If you're going to get mad at Nintendo and TPCI, do it for a good reason. Like the fact that they've been selling you the same game twice, or sometimes 3 or 4 times, or the whole artificial scarcity thing that Nintendo seems to have baked into their business model now. Fuck that anti-consumer bullshit. And on the off chance that Sinnoh remakes are announced this week, well, fuck me, I guess.